Let's divorce that useless daughter-in-law and get Jim a younger woman. That way, he can have an heir.
No, no. With Jim's age, that might be difficult. Wouldn't it be better to get Karen married off quickly and have her produce an heir?
That might be a good idea.
Unaware that my daughter Karen and I had returned home, my in-laws were having a shocking conversation. Setting aside the idea of Jim and me divorcing, the thought of treating Karen like a tool was unthinkable. My in-laws are people who would do anything to protect their own interests. And they treat me like a maid, thinking it's their rightful privilege. They have no idea how much I've struggled to support Jim and his parents. I could have endured it if it were just me. But the thought of them using my precious treasure, Karen, as well was something I could no longer overlook. I held Karen's hand, who was quietly trembling next to me, with conviction. Looking up at me, Karen nodded strongly, and I made up my mind to fight back. My name is Ellie, and I'm a 45-year-old working mother. I work part-time at a design firm on a regular basis. My daughter Karen is a lovely 10-year-old girl, and we live with my in-laws. They run a small company, and my husband Jim works as the second-generation president. Though they hold the title of officers, the real power in the company lies not with Jim but with his parents. We run a business, so we're not short on money. Could you quit your job and focus on the house? At the beginning of our marriage, Jim asked me this, and I quit the company I had worked at since graduating college. I had a solid track record working as a designer at a reasonably sized design office. So, when I left, everyone said it was a waste. But it's for Jim. He's busy with the company, so I have to support him from now on. Naive as I was, I genuinely believed that I was going to be a good wife for Jim. But the reality that awaited me was unimaginable. Being short on money and because my in-laws' house was conveniently attached to the company, we started living with them from the beginning of our marriage, and that was a mistake.
I'll leave the breakfast to you. And the laundry and cleaning too. We're working unlike you, so we don't have time for household chores.
On the first day of living together, my mother-in-law Jane dumped a ton of household chores on me. At first, I obediently complied, thinking it was my duty as a daughter-in-law. However,
what's this omelet? I like mine with cheese. Make it again.
My father-in-law Bob would always complain about my cooking.
Ellie, there's a stain on this shirt. You're not planning on making us wear this, are you? Wash it again.
Jane would scream at me over trivial things.
Household chores are tough. What are you talking about? We have it much harder than you, Ellie. I wish you could take our place.
Jim wouldn't even try to understand my hardships and kept saying selfish things. From the beginning of our marriage, all three of them treated me like a convenient maid. Despite this, I never thought of divorcing Jim and continued to endure this harsh marriage life. Looking back, I was probably brainwashed by Jim and his parents. However, after my daughter Karen was born and I started to think about her happiness, I began to have a few doubts about my life. Is this really okay? While thinking such thoughts, I continued to silently perform my household duties. I would wake up earlier than anyone else to prepare breakfast, wash a mountain of laundry, and hang it out to dry.
Good morning, Mom.
Good morning, Karen. Thank you for today as well. Lately, Karen has been helping me with the chores, which has been a great help. The usual scene is my in-laws and Jim finally waking up and starting to eat breakfast after I've finished hanging the laundry. The dishes remain on the table even after they've finished eating. I clean up, see Karen off, and hurry to get ready for my part-time job. After giving birth to Karen, Jim said he wanted me to work outside again. I use my previous experience to work at a design office. The company's earnings alone aren't enough. But even after I started working outside, they wouldn't help with the household chores. When I return from my part-time job, I quickly bring in the laundry, finish preparing dinner, and then help with the company's paperwork. It seems they can't even afford to hire an office worker. Of course, I don't get paid for my work. I stay up the latest at night doing household chores before I can finally go to sleep. I'm so tired. Day after day, fatigue accumulates in my mind and body. Yet, I have no idea how to change the situation, and life goes on as usual. Exhausted, my body finally reaches its limit.
Huh? I'm feeling dizzy.
One day at my part-time job, I was struck by severe dizziness and collapsed. The panicked staff took me to the hospital. It's due to fatigue, where the doctor told me.
Let's start with an 4 and see how you feel.
Lying in bed, I watched the 4 drip, feeling detached. I sent the staff member who accompanied me home first. I felt bad for making them stay. Right, I need to contact Jim. It was past noon when I collapsed, and even after treatment, I wouldn't make it home in time for dinner. Clearly, this lifestyle caused my collapse. Hoping Jim would rethink and share the household duties if he knew I had collapsed. I called him. But Jim said,
"You collapsed?"
"Yeah. So, can you pick me up from the hospital? And I was hoping you could prepare dinner."
"Why do I have to do that? I'm swamped here, busier than a one-armed paper hanger."
Stunned by his response, I fell silent.
I wish I were the one collapsing. Stop causing trouble. It's probably nothing serious, right? I won't pick you up. Get home by yourself. Buy something for dinner on your way.
Without waiting for my reply, he hung up. After the 4, I recovered enough to walk on my own. Suppressing the urge to cry, I bought dinner for everyone at the supermarket on my way home. "Mom, what's this? Takeout is unusual. Actually, I was at the hospital until just now. Are you okay?" Only Karen was concerned and worried after learning I had collapsed. The in-laws complained about the taste being too strong or the food being bad. Jim just ate in silence. Following my hospitalization, I had several late nights due to certain circumstances. Since that day, Karen has been helping more with the chores, but I can't let her bear any more burden. I explained the situation to Jim, asking for improvements and some help with the chores. "I just need a little help with the household duties. I work outside too. If things continue this way, I might collapse from fatigue again." But Jim just made an annoyed face.
Karen is helping out, isn't that enough?
Karen is still a child. It's not right to leave household duties to a child.
It's fine. It's like preparation for marriage.
He refused to take the matter seriously as usual. And lately, my late returns have continued. This has pushed back the time I finish chores, cutting into my sleep. Then, something happened that pushed me even further.
Why are you coming home so late? You've been late recently. Are you having an affair or something?
Jane exploded with anger over my recent late nights. She ambushed me outside the house and started lecturing.
You're lacking awareness as a daughter-in-law. We're working hard while you're out playing.
I wasn't out playing, and I certainly wasn't having an affair. But Jane stubbornly blamed me without listening.
You're useless for not providing a male heir, and we're still keeping you in this house. Don't you feel grateful at all?
Jane has always been obsessed with having an heir. But there's no substantial inheritance to pass down in this house. There's just a declining company that depends on my income to keep going. Yet, Jane constantly uses this to berate me.
Grandma, what are you doing?
If Karen hadn't come out, Jane's lecture would have continued.
Karen, go inside.
I heard yelling about Mom coming home late. Grandma's lecturing is making Mom come home even later. That means dinner gets pushed back, and everyone gets hungry. Jane reluctantly went back inside after Karen's calm observation.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah. Welcome home, Mom. Seeing her smile, I almost burst into tears. A month later, I was still coming home late. It seemed that my in-laws and Jim had gotten used to my late returns. As long as I took care of the household chores, there were no complaints, and peaceful days continued. However, one day I came home early and happened to meet Karen on her way back from school, so we walked home together. Karen, happy to be walking home with me, had a cute smile on her face. Upon arrival, I quietly opened the front door as usual. Making noise would get me yelled at by the in-laws. Out of habit formed over many years, I was about to head to my room with Karen when I overheard this conversation from behind the closed living room door.
Let's divorce that useless daughter-in-law and have Jim marry a younger woman. That way, he can have an heir.
No. With Jim's age, that might be difficult.
Oh, come on. Jim is still young. Plus, as the company's president, he'll have women coming to him, right? Anyone would be better than that incompetent one.
Realizing the words useless and incompetent referred to me, I involuntarily stopped in my tracks. I've been verbally abused to my face many times, so I'm not hurt by it anymore. However, what followed, the true feelings of my in-laws, drained all the color from my face.
Wouldn't it be better to get Karen married off quickly and have her produce an heir?
That might be a good idea. Come to think of it, my friend's son is still unmarried. Let's marry them off once he graduates high school. Bob laughed heartily as if it was a great joke.
Hey, how old is your friend's son? I wouldn't want someone too much older. Oh, please. He's still a young man of 30. Even if we wait for Karen to graduate high school, he'll barely be in his 30s.
Marrying a teenage Karen to a man in his 30s? I felt darkness envelop me at the thought of such a vile plan. Do these two not care about forcing their granddaughter into an unwanted marriage? Probably not. They might think they love their granddaughter, but ultimately, they're only concerned with themselves. Securing a male heir takes precedence over Karen's feelings. Shocked by what I had heard, I finally came back to my senses. Next to me was Karen. What must my daughter be thinking after hearing this conversation? I tentatively looked at Karen and saw her large eyes brimming with tears, her face pale as she looked at me.
Mom!
Her eyes were pleading for help. If I leave Karen in this house, I don't know when she'll become a victim of my in-laws' schemes. Jim will definitely not help Karen. I took a small breath. And then, I grasped Karen's hand firmly.
It's okay, Karen. I'm going to do something, so you just need to listen to me carefully.
I resolved to protect Karen at all costs. Karen nodded slightly in agreement. And so, I took action. Hours later, I received a call from Jane. I was busy doing something and couldn't pick up the phone. It wasn't until nearly 0 a.m. that things calmed down. Sighing, I finally answered the continuous calls from Jane.
What is it? What do you mean, what? Where have you been and what have you been doing at this hour?
I instinctively pulled the phone away from my ear as Jane screamed in a frenzy. This reaction was within my expectations, so I responded with utmost calm.
I can't tell you the location. But don't worry, Karen is with me. Where are you? Come back home right now. How could a daughter-in-law be so unreasonable?
I sighed deeply at Jane's shouting.
As if I'd tell you. Also, we won't be returning to that house. Karen and I have moved to a different place, so please take care of your own chores. What did you say?
Jane's voice was louder than ever, prompting me to pull the phone away from my ear again. I wondered if making such a noise might disturb the neighbors of their detached house. While I was concerned, I decided to explain things clearly to the frantic Jane in a way that she could understand.
Actually, I've been looking for an apartment where Karen and I could live together. I've had enough of life in that house. So, when I found a good apartment, I signed the lease and started moving our belongings and preparing for our new life. That's why I've been coming home late recently.
Indeed, I had been fed up with life in that house for a long time. The day I decided to leave was when I collapsed from exhaustion. If I stayed in that house, I was sure something bad would happen to me in the near future. What would become of Karen then? Thinking about this led me to the decision to leave the house to protect both Karen and myself. I immediately started looking for an apartment, signed a lease, and began preparing for our new life. As I moved our belongings, they gradually disappeared, yet neither my in-laws nor Jim noticed. It's astonishing how they truly saw me as nothing more than a convenient maid. It became clear that, while they pretended to care for Karen as their granddaughter, they had absolutely no interest in our lives. That's why I had been preparing to move for some time, but the day we were supposed to leave was supposed to be a bit later. After overhearing my in-laws' conversation that day, realizing it was an emergency, I escaped from my in-laws' house with the remaining belongings. Thanks to having moved most of our things already, we could escape quickly, though I would have had to go back and forth several times if it weren't for Karen.
So, we won't be returning to that house. We've finished moving our belongings, so there's no need to go back. Anything left in the house is no longer needed, so feel free to dispose of it. After hearing my explanation, Jane seemed to be at a loss for words. From the other end, Hey, Jane, what's going on? Change the phone to me.
of the phone. I could hear Bob and Jim nearby. As there was no reply, I was about to hang up when Jane suddenly screamed so loudly, I almost jumped.
Kidnapper! Give back my granddaughter! You can do whatever you want. It's fine if you don't come back home. But Karen is our precious family. Give Karen back.
Jane's words almost made me laugh.
Precious family? How dare you such a thing? Hand her over to people who would force her to marry someone she doesn't want and have children? I will never hand over my precious daughter to such despicable people.
Jane probably didn't expect me to have heard that conversation. I could hear her gasping for breath.
Do you really need to be so obsessed with having an heir? Now that it's come to this, let me say that there's nothing worth inheriting in that house. We need an heir for the company. Who would want to inherit a failing company that can't even turn a profit? It would be better if Jane and her generation just shut it down. It would reduce expenses and make their retirement more comfortable, wouldn't it?
However, Jane would likely not agree to this proposal. Jane is absurdly attached to being the wife of a company owner. She behaves as if she's different from the other housewives in the neighborhood because of her status. Because of this attitude, she is disliked by everyone. The whole neighborhood keeps their distance, but Jane.
Everyone's just jealous because I'm the wife of a president.
Poor people. Misunderstands the situation. Bob, too, wouldn't want to give up the status of being a company owner, determined to keep the business going at all costs. These people value their own appearances above all else. They would sacrifice their granddaughter to protect their pride. While Jim might not be as attached to his current status as his parents, having worked nowhere but at the company makes finding another job difficult for him. Plus, quitting to job hunt would seem too bothersome for him. In essence, all three are selfish to the core. Having lived with them for years, I understand their personalities all too well. I knew they wouldn't agree to my proposal, but I had to say it.
A part-timer like you raising Karen? Impossible.
Anticipating this angle, I immediately retorted.
A part-timer? What are you talking about? I'm a full-time employee. Eh? Since when did you become a full-time employee?
My in-laws and Jim, who only cared that I was earning money outside, had not noticed at all that I had become a full-time employee. My late returns were partly due to preparing for our new life, but also because I had become busier after becoming a full-time employee. After I collapsed, the president of the design firm offered concern and advice. I explained my entire situation to him, exhausted. Then, the president,
"Then, I'll formally hire you,"
offered. It must have been beneficial that I had gained experience as a designer before getting married. Though I was a part-timer, I consistently delivered results, and the president had considered making me a full-time employee eventually.
It's not like I left the house without a plan. We may not live in luxury, but Karen and I have enough to get by, so no worries. Your household might struggle without me, but that can't be helped. If you insist on keeping the company going, perhaps Jane should start working outside?
However, Jane has never worked outside that company and she is already over 70 years old. She doesn't have any special skills or qualifications. And even before considering those, her personality would make it quite difficult for her to find another job. Even if she did find a job, I can easily imagine her not getting along with others and not lasting long. I almost laughed at the thought. Jane herself seemed to understand this, as she struggled to find a rebuttal to my words.
A useless incompetent like you becoming a full-time employee is impossible. Before I got married, I worked seriously and gained experience. If I hadn't quit then, I probably would have been in a decent position at my former company.
I still regret quitting my job at Jim's request. Ending up having to work again because we were short on money. I wish I had planned my life more thoughtfully. But now, there's no room for error. It's not just about me anymore. If I make a wrong choice, it could affect Karen's life. As her mother, I left that house with that resolve. Then, the president. Jane mumbled in frustration, unable to come up with a good response. Then, Jane played her last card.
I'll find you and bring you back. I'll use whatever means necessary, including hiring a detective. Oh, and I know a lawyer. I'll ask him to sue you as a criminal.
But I was so astounded by her half-hearted last resort that I couldn't help but sigh. How exactly does she plan to sue me, and for what crime? The idea that Jane has a lawyer acquaintance is definitely a lie. Looking down on and ridiculing others is second nature to Jane. She's not the type to have a wide circle of acquaintances.
Is that so? Actually, I'm living in an apartment managed by my dad, and my brother, concerned about me, lives in the next unit. If you're okay with that, feel free to come by any time.
However, Jane scoffed at my words in return.
Just because your dad and brother are nearby, what does that change? We have 2 men on our side too.
Jane might have completely forgotten about my family. Having treated me like a maid for years, it seems she also looks down on my family. Therefore, I decided to remind Jane about my family.
My brother is a former army officer and currently runs a gym. Jim and Bob wouldn't stand a chance against him. Besides, Dad, who manages this apartment, also owns several other properties. Through his business, he has connections with lawyers.
My brother was in the army until not too long ago. Thanks to his love for physical training, his strength is considerable, as he continues to exercise in his own gym. And my father, as a businessman, has far more prowess than my in-laws could ever hope to match. Successful in managing multiple properties, he indeed has the financial flexibility and legal connections to support us. In fact, I had already consulted one of those lawyers and was introduced to another lawyer specializing in divorce. There were several reasons I hadn't relied on my powerful family until now. A major reason was that I had been in a state of brainwashing while living in that house. Years of living as a maid had become normal to me, and I remained under this influence until the day I collapsed. And the most significant reason was that I didn't want to worry my family. When I got married, when I gave birth to Karen, my family was so happy. They genuinely wished for my happiness. I didn't want to cause them any worry, so I kept pretending everything was fine. Reflecting on it now, I think I should have sought help sooner. The reasons I didn't divorce Jim were because I was brainwashed and I thought it wouldn't be good for Karen. I worried that when she considered marriage in the future, being from a single-parent family might cause distrust in her partner. Such thoughts kept pushing the idea of divorce further away from me. However, not divorcing would put Karen in danger. Hearing my in-laws' conversation finally woke me up. As it turns out, my brother, who is married and usually lives elsewhere, agreed to live in the next room temporarily as my bodyguard. His wife was very supportive of this decision. She was actually quite excited about it, saying it was like having a vacation home. Thanks to my understanding family, I can now live here safely and happily with Karen. When I mentioned that I had consulted a lawyer, Jane lost her words again. Then, with a strained voice, she said,
"Even if you consulted a lawyer, there's no evidence that we did anything wrong. Of course, I've documented all the harassment I've received from you. These records have already been submitted to the lawyer. The lawyer says we have a strong case if we sue. You mentioned having a lawyer acquaintance, right? Please inform them that we are prepared to go to court for a divorce."
I knew Jane didn't really have a lawyer acquaintance, but I provocatively relayed that message. Jane was saying something on the other end of the phone, but I couldn't hear it well. The lawyer I hired was shocked after reviewing the evidence of harassment I had endured. I couldn't believe I hadn't realized sooner how badly I had been treated. But now, I can no longer afford to be a fool. Taking a deep breath, I spoke to Jane with a clear and firm tone.
"If you agree to the divorce quietly and hand over Karen's custody, I won't escalate this any further." "Wait! How will we live without Ellie?"
I almost let out my anger hearing her still say such things. In fact, my response might have leaked a bit of irritation.
"Enough. After treating me as nothing more than a convenient maid, using me until I collapsed, and not even offering an apology, do you really think it's okay to continue like this? Let me be clear, you people are not normal. It's beyond being unreasonable. Whatever terrible things happen to you from now on are your responsibility, the result of your actions. Whether you struggle to live or end up homeless, it has nothing to do with me and Karen. No matter what happens, I won't have any sympathy for you, and frankly, I don't care."
With that, Jane seemed to finally grasp the reality of the situation. After that, she remained silent, so I hung up the phone without saying anything else. Then, stretching broadly, I looked forward to a free life starting tomorrow. Later, through my lawyer, I demanded compensation from Jim. Jim was quite stubborn, but the threat of,
"Then, let's go to court,"
from the lawyer scared him, and he eventually agreed to the divorce under our terms. Finally, they insisted on meeting me and Karen, so under the condition that my brother would be present, we agreed to meet my in-laws and Jim.
"Please come back. I've finally realized how important you are to me."
Jim says so, too. Can't we work something out? If you're unhappy with our past life, we can improve.
"Karen, you want to be with Grandpa and Grandma, don't you?"
Regretting coming the moment they started speaking, I was about to say,
"Enough."
but Karen, sitting next to me, interrupted.
"Mom and I are not coming back."
How could you say that, Karen? Are you okay with not having a dad?
"Yes, I'm fine."
Karen replied without hesitation, and Jim let out a dumbfounded noise.
"Life is easier without Dad. You didn't do anything when Mom was suffering. It's much better without such a dad."
Then, Karen looked straight at her grandparents and continued.
"I hate both Grandpa and Grandma. I don't want to be with them anymore. I only came today because you insisted on meeting. I won't come to see you again even if you call. Life with Mom is really fun. So, please don't bother us anymore."
Everyone present was stunned by Karen's clear rejection. Karen. Only I, teary-eyed, hugged Karen, feeling a mix of regret for making my child Karen say so much and admiration for having such a reliable ally. Rejected by her granddaughter, Jane collapsed in tears on the spot. Bob, too,
"It's a lie,"
murmured, unable to accept the reality before him. What have I done? Jim turned pale, regretting his actions, but it was all too late. We left the three, drowning in despair, without saying a word and walked away. Our life since then has been so filled with happiness it's hard to compare it to our previous life. We have informed the three through a lawyer that they are to have no contact with us, so we should be safe now. I've been busy as an employee, but with the support of my family, I am living happily fulfilled days. Mom, are we okay now? For a while after the divorce, Karen would often ask anxiously. Each time, I would respond with a beaming smile.
"Yes, we're okay now. I'm the happiest I've ever been in my life. It's all thanks to you, Karen. Thank you for being my daughter."
Hugging her tightly, Karen hugged me back. I will protect this precious treasure for as long as I live. With a strong resolve, I live each day to the fullest.